So a very commonly tested concept on the SAT is, can you identify an independent clause or a dependent clause? So let me tell you, what are independent clauses? What are dependent clauses? An independent clause is a clause that has a subject and a verb and completes a full thought. Our first example here being, Jim ate the sandwiches with his mother. There's a subject, Jim. There's a verb, ate. And it has a complete thought. We know what's going on here. Jim ate a sandwich with his mother. Very simple, very easy, independent clause. Usually this should come to you instinctually. But if you're struggling, there's another way to see if it's an independent clause. And you look at it, you identify a very clear subject, you identify a very clear verb, and you look for a common idea, and you make sure you read it to yourself, and you make sure that it makes sense to you as a sentence on its own. However, not all sentences or not all clauses are independent clauses. We have dependent clauses as well. Let's take a look here. When Jim ate the sandwich with his mother. When Jim ate the sandwich with his mother. This is not an independent clause. Why? Because the idea has not been fully conveyed. We want to know when Jim ate the sandwich with his mother. What happened? Did they have toast as well? Did they have omelets? Was there an explosion? What happened? I want to know. I want to know what happened, and this sentence doesn't tell me anything because it's not a sentence, it's a dependent clause. All right? And how do we know it's a dependent clause? It has a subject, it is a verb. What's the problem? What is it lacking? That's the wrong question. It's not what is lacking, it's what we added here. It's a word like when. We call this a marker word. It tells us if the clause is going to be a dependent or an independent one. And a dependent one, like when, or although, if, in, of, many prepositions fall into this case, into this category. If we have a preposition at the beginning of a clause, big hint that that is not going to be a independent clause, but rather a dependent clause. So that's the basic premise here. We have independent clauses and dependent clauses. How are these tested on the SAT? If you've taken any practice tests, you know that they will not sit down and ask you, is this an independent clause? Is this a dependent clause? No, because that's boring. The SAT is much more creative than that, and they have come up with very shrewd and interesting ways to test whether you know this concept right here. So the first way they do it is they give you a passage, or the only way they do it is they give you a passage, and there are small errors here and there in the passage, small grammatical errors that you, the test taker, need to correct. And let's take a look at some common combinations. The first one being independent and independent clause. How do we connect two independent clauses? We can either do what I like to call a fanboys conjunction, comma, fanboys conjunction, comma, fanboys conjunction. What does fanboys conjunction mean? Fanboys is for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Should I repeat that? For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. These conjunctions are crucial, and I don't like to tell you to memorize anything for the SAT because it is a test of skill. However, if there's anything you need to memorize, this you need to memorize. Fanboys conjunctions are critical because they appear they appear a lot on the SAT. So if you see an independent clause and another independent clause, but no appropriate punctuation in the middle, then that's your hint that it's going to be comma fanboys. Another option is this. This is a semicolon. Sometimes you don't need a fanboys conjunction. You just put a semicolon in between the two independent clauses, and that is grammatically correct. Another time, you can just end the sentence and start a new sentence, capitalize the next word. Not very difficult. So those combining independent and independent clauses are one of the more simpler things to do. However, what else can we have? We can connect independent and dependent clauses. Now, when this happens, a simple comma will do, all right? A simple comma will definitely do, or another marker word like however without a fanboys conjunction, all right? So that will all do. However, so we talked about connecting an independent and dependent, but there are some common errors that students run into. First one being comma splices. If you have an independent clause and an independent clause, you can't connect that with a comma. That comma is invalid and wrong. So, nope, you are not going to select that. If there are two independent clauses, must have a fanboys conjunction, comma fanboys, or a semicolon, or a new sentence. Sentence fragments. Sometimes you just leave the dependent clause alone to be left in the wild without an independent clause. You can't do that. A dependent clause needs an independent clause in order to be a full sentence. So this is going to go out the window. Next one are fused sentences. Now these are run-on sentences where you have independent clause after independent clause after independent clause after dependent clause without the proper punctuation in between. Make sure that you have the proper punctuation, the proper conjunctive words when you are selecting and taking the test.